My name is Chris Gethin, and what I aim to bring to you is inspiration, motivation from clients, everything that will allow you to evolve as a human being. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Chris Gethin podcast. The guest that I have today is speaking to us from England, and he's educated in food and nutrient technology. He also holds qualifications in pharmacy and biochemistry. And having been involved in the anti-aging community for more than 25 years now, he also advises and moderates for numerous organizations, including the British Longevity Society, the Monte Carlo Anti-Aging Congress, the Stromboli Conference on Aging and Cancer, and the London Anti-Aging Conference. Today, he is also the co-editor of Lifespan Magazine Journal, the editor-in-chief of Aging Matters Magazine, and a founder and VP to the IAS group. Phil Micans, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Hello, Chris. It's great to be here, and hope we can help some of your viewers today and help them with whatever questions and answers that they require.
Well, that's why we're here, and that's why I've got you on the show. I've actually heard you on a couple of other shows, and I know that you come highly recommended from a couple of friends of mine in the industry, from the biohacking side of things. So I thought, I've got to get this guy on the show, because I was speaking at the Health Optimization Summit, and the thing that kept on coming up in conversation and from the speakers was bioregulating peptides. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of whispers, there's a lot of talk about this, and we have been aware of peptides for about 4 or 5 years, I have, mm-hmm. and now bioregulating peptides is coming up more and more. Mm-hmm. Could you explain briefly what a peptide is and what a bioregulating peptide is?
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah, my pleasure. Well, it all starts with amino acids. So I think we're all familiar with different kinds of amino acids that are out there. But once you start conjoining amino acids, so for example, so you get 2 amino acids join one another, that becomes known as a dipeptide. That's the beginning of the peptide group. And then basically, as you add amino acids, and of course that variance can be in, thousands of different ways. You could have 6 different amino acids and you can conjoin them in different ways to make different peptides. Then we create peptides per se, and there are names for the amounts of amino acids. We won't get too far into that. But eventually, of course, they even become hormones, because you get something like human growth hormone is made up of 191 amino acids. And it gets a little bit confusing then about what is a hormone and what is a peptide. Because a hormone, of course, is something that's circulating or manufactured within the body. Either from, again, go back to HGH, we could say it's manufactured by the pituitary gland. But peptides are in our body too. For example, the thymus is producing thymic hormones, but actually when you evaluate them, there are 13 different, but they're peptides. And there are other glands. The hypothalamus produces a hormone called TRH, thyroid releasing hormone. But you actually analyze it as a chemist and you go, oh, it's peptide. In fact, that's actually 3 amino acids. So that is a quick synopsis of the relationship between amino acids, peptides, hormones. They're all made of amino acids. It's just basically what sequence they're in, how long they are. That's essentially it. Now we jump into what is a bioregulator. And this is a little stranger. First of all, the term has been created by a gentleman called Professor Vladimir Kavinson, who's a very high-end Russian man who's been around a long time. And he, we'll get into the story later, but basically he was in the 1980s, when it was the Soviet Union, of course, he was given an edict from the Kremlin, which was, what can help our troops? Okay, basically that's it. Go out and find something that will help our troops. And he had endless resources. In fact, he told me personally that he didn't think today they could do it, because he could just pick the phone up and say, I want this, I want that. And it came from the top so he could have it. Well, they went down blind alleys. It wasn't as if the first thing they came across helped. But what they ended up discovering was that very short chains of amino acids, and what am I talking about? Well, this can be 2, 3, or 4 amino acids. So these are the really short chains of amino acids. They are in food, they're in different food groups, and they act as gene switches. It explains the epigenetics of food in a heartbeat. And I could tell you a little story here. I hope you don't mind. I did warn you earlier, I'm a bit raconteur. But when I did my first course at the London College, when I was learning about nutrition way back, one day they put a pie chart up and they said, this is what you find in food. X percentage of vitamins, X percentage of minerals, X percentage of oils. I prefer to call them oils than fats because fats don't make you fat. So I just use the word oils, gets rid of that thing. But most of it was fiber. If I remember right, it was over 50% was fiber. Now, this was 1980, 1981 when I was doing this. And I remember thinking to myself that day, well, fiber must be very important because nature doesn't waste anything, right? It's there for a reason. And our bodies have assimilated themselves over millions of years to use what's available. And at the time, nobody was really talking much about fiber. But the second thought that popped into my head that very day was, or they've missed something, that there are other things in food that weren't on this chart. Now, fast forward to about 2010, when I first met Professor Kavinson, and he was lecturing in Istanbul, and I went along there. And when he explained this moment that these short chain peptides that are found in foods act as gene switches, I think I was a cartoon. There was a light bulb over my head, you know, and it was an epiphany, because it immediately took me back to that moment in the classroom where I answered the question. They've missed something. They had missed the fact that these peptide bioregulators are in food and they're acting as highly specific gene switches. So first thing we can say, there are two things that make up a bioregulator, and possibly three, as sanctioned by Professor Kavinson. The first is that they must be short chains of amino acids. So they must be 2, 3, or 4 amino acids. Now, there are short chains of amino acids that are not classified as bioregulators. So what's going on there? Well, secondly, they have to be proven to be gene switches. Now, we will discover more. Doubtless there will be others that will have this capacity, but at the moment, we don't have the evidence to say that. So they're short chains of amino acids, they act as gene switches. And the third thing, and perhaps the most mind-blowing thing, is that whatever they're affecting, they bioregulate. So in other words, if the gene needs to be switched on, it's switched off. If the gene needs to be silenced, it's silenced. That part of it is still, you know, a very difficult thing to get one's head around, but we can get into what that actually means in terms of what it does inside our bodies.
Okay, so yeah, let's go into that. So for instance, what you're telling me is if someone is taking human growth hormone, then of course, then they've got this hormone that is being excreted. However, their own regulation of that hormone could potentially be switched off, such as if someone's taking testosterone, now they've got higher testosterone levels from a synthetic standpoint, but from their own testosterone production, that could be potentially switched off. With the regulator, it's not going to do that. It's going to regulate it to your own optimized healthy levels.
That's exactly right, Chris. That's exactly right. And that's pretty incredible. Now, I'm not advocating that we don't check ourselves and do blood work or whatever it is that's necessary. But in 40 years that the Russians have been using this, they've dosed it over 1 million times, because you have to bear in mind that at the beginning, this was a Soviet military secret. This was being given to their elite troops in all sorts of areas. And actually, the Kremlin wanted to help the people that were in nuclear submarines or they were in nuclear silos, because, hey, guess what? They were aging fast. Not really rocket science to understand if you're only 6 feet away from a nuclear reactor. You know what I mean. But at least they wanted to help them, and that was part of also Professor Kavinson's remit. And there were nasty battlefield weapons we won't get into, but if they were ever used, and thank God they haven't been, but if they were ever used, they wanted to be able to fix their troops. And by the way, these bioregulators were also used, one of their early applications was in the folks that got badly damaged in the Chernobyl nuclear accident. So that was one of their early applications. And today, and this is an open secret, they are used in sports, in the Russians Olympic teams, and also in the cosmonauts, in the space guys, to help them recover much more quickly from the extreme environments, or in terms of the Olympics, the extreme exercise routines that they put themselves through. So, right. So what I want to say is that with this amazing record of over a million dose uses they know of over 40 years, they have not seen a serious side effect.
Wow, that's phenomenal. That's absolutely phenomenal. No side effects. So let's talk about, for instance, a lot of our listeners here are into active sports, whether it be in endurance sports, hybrid athleticism, strength trained, and they deal with a lot of injuries. And a lot of them they understand, there are peptides out there such as TB500, BPC 157, those probably being the most popular darlings of the peptide industry. Are there bioregulating? Well, number one, I don't know if you'd class them as bioregulating peptides. And if not, are there bioregulating peptides that you know of that are as good, if not better than them, to help with the regeneration of connective tissue?
Well, yes, I can answer. First of all, I know about those peptides you spoke about, especially BCP 157, although I have no personal experience with them. And I understand they're pretty good. It hasn't been sanctioned as a bioregulator. It hasn't met those 3 criteria. I guess it would also be down to Professor Cavinson to go back to his laboratory, and it's a very major place they have, actually. It's based in St. Petersburg, to go back and do that work. But what I can say is, yes. Now, what's quite interesting, there is a muscle peptide, okay, that will help the support and recovery of muscles. There are many. It's like learning a new language when you get into all these crazy names that we have to put up with. So I tend to keep it real simple. I tend to say it's a muscle peptide. There's the testes peptide or whatever, but they do have names. I mean, the Russians, they've branded it Gotriax. Okay, but we can talk later on about where to go to find the information a lot more easier, rather than bamboozle people with all these crazy names. There is also a testes peptide as well. Just a caveat here, the peptides, these peptide bioregulators, are going to invigorate a specific tissue or gland. So in the testes peptide, it's going to either switch on or silence the genes responsible for producing testosterone. Okay, and that's the thing there. If you're already very high in testosterone, it is going to do nothing for you, because it will probably even silence that gene and actually bring your level down. That is, of course, it is actually your testes that's producing all that testosterone, and you're not actually introducing something else to do it. But here's one thing to remember. If we were taking testosterone, in the various ways you can take testosterone, you're putting testosterone into your blood, and bang, bang, it's going to work. But in the peptide is invigorating, in this case, the testes. Guess what? Ladies don't have testes, does nothing for them. In the same way, if a gentleman took the ovary peptide, it would do nothing for him. So you have to just remember, they are tissue and organ specific. The other tissues we share, right? We've all got skin, we've all got retinas, or whatever, or the prostrate one. I see. There's a few. There are a few that we'd say that is male specific, that is female specific. So that's just one thing to bear in mind. But there are certainly testes, and there are certainly muscle peptides. Just one very interesting thing. Now, I have in the magazine Aging Matters, and if anyone's interested, they can go to agingmatters.com and they can download a copy free of charge. And I did an interview with Professor Cavinson a couple of years back, and we did a whole section where we spoke about how they were used in the Russian Olympic team. It was a bunch of girls who it was the London Olympics, so it was a few years ago now, and they won gold in the floor exercises, the gymnasts on the floor thing. And they actually gave them a whole range. I was kind of expecting him to say, yeah, we gave them the muscle and we gave them this. They actually gave them the liver, the kidney, the heart. They gave them a wide range of peptides, which I was quite surprised at. But what it came down to, and what was actually a little frightening, because you probably know this concept, you've heard of hormesis, I'm sure, Chris,
Yeah, of course.
which is basic. And of course, most forms of exercise are hormetic, right? It's a mild stress that you're putting on your body to do that many press ups or whatever it is, but your body responds well to it. But of course, there's a tipping point. And if you do extreme exercise, you can start to argue that damages begin to get undertaken. And especially aerobic exercises for older individuals. Okay, there's a great book out there written by a friend of mine called Dr. Rich Lippman, and it's called Stay 40. And I'd recommend that because he's gone into some detail. But there's a section in, sorry, I'm going slightly off topic here, but there's a section in there where you see these people, men and women, 40 years old, 50 years old, some 60-year-olds, and they're standing there in their underwear and they're all a bit flabby. And then they go off and they do their aerobics. And then a year later, as you turn over the next page or whatever, you see them again in their underwear again, but to a person, slimmer, trimmer, and you think, God, good, yeah, shows it works. But what he didn't do is he didn't put their heads in. When you turn over the page, there they all are again, but their heads aren't shown. And then the bombshell, you turn over and you see their heads. To a person, they look 10 years older. And the reason is that they've not protected themselves against the amount of free radicals that they're producing with that intensive aerobic exercise. So the body performs, but the heads don't. So have a look at that if that interests you.
Yeah,
and of course, he is a free radical expert. So he goes on to explain the kind of antioxidants that can really assist if you're going to go down that path. But what was shocking for the Russians were there were these, young 20-odd-year-old girls who were gold medal winners in their sport. I mean, they're at the top of their game, absolutely. And they tested, leading up to the Olympics, they tested their telomeres. Now we all know a bit about telomeres, and they were shocking. They had the telomere length of the average 40-year-old. And you'd look at these girls and you go, "What? They're so fit. Look at them," and you'd say they're the gold medal winners. So they were shocked. But the great news was by applying certain peptide bioregulators, they recovered so quickly within weeks that they actually got their telomeres back to what their age. It's very hard to get less than 20, right? I mean, we talk about anti-aging, you're not going to become a 10-year-old. So, but that was amazing. So they tend to actually, to my surprise, give them a kind of plethora. They don't just give them, the muscle and one or two others. They actually give them quite a gambit. So if anyone's interested, they can read that interview I did with Professor Cavinson and get to learn a bit about what these girls took, these Olympic team.
That's fascinating. Yeah, because, that's one thing that interests me as well. I just had the results back of, I've historically had higher liver enzymes before I got into weight training, before I started doing exercise. So, as soon as I got into exercise, kidney creatinine button levels got up a little bit. But just looking at this, and I see, from what I've looked at, like you said, there's bioregulating peptides for the thyroid, for the liver, for the kidney and stuff like that. And they are a sequence of amino acids, like you said, 2, 3, or 4. Now, I know if you're to actually eat that liver, let's say from a cow, from a lamb or whatever, you're going to have more peptides there. You're going to have more amino acids, but you're at least going to have some of those amino acids, those essential amino acids. So would eating, let's say, a liver do something similar for your liver if I was to go out and eat beef liver?
Yeah, I have no doubt the answer to that question is yes. What you take when you take the supplement, though, of course, you're getting a very concentrated. And people have said, how many livers would I have to eat to get what's in this capsule? Well, I don't honestly know the answer to that, but it would be quite a lot. But, it goes back to, if we think of our forefathers, our forebears, go back to say, sorry, I'm going to use some English expressions, the Victorians or the Edwardians. So we go back to, say, the 18th and early 19th century. They didn't waste anything. If you ever look at a menu from that time, if they had I don't know, a bird of some description on the table, they would eat everything. Everything. We don't want the entrails anymore. We don't want the testicles of the animal. We don't want, you know, we don't even want the black meat of the animal, right? Black part of the chicken, say. You know, we've become very fussy. We don't eat the bones. We don't, you know, we've become super fussy. But actually what we're doing, it's the message that's in the food. It's the epigenetics. So in the early days of medicine, and it still goes on, there were organ extracts. You would be injecting a liver, and it still goes on. There's still many countries around the world that do that. I think we've gone up a level to understand that we are getting the peptides out of those. One quick story I like to tell. A lot of people who want to bulk up, they all know to eat protein, right? You go out and eat steaks or salmon or whatever it is you like to get the protein. But everybody knows that if you have protein enter the stomach, it gets destroyed by stomach acid. So how on earth does eating a steak help you bulk up your protein in your muscles? How can it do that? I think we know the answer now. What happens is that it gets broken down, that steak, but some of it gets broken down into the peptide bioregulators. And the Russians have got all the work on this. We know this backwards now. It's the peptides that enter the bloodstream and they induce protein synthesis. It's the peptides that are inducing the protein synthesis, not the protein in the steak.
Yeah,
so
it breaks down those amino acids and extracting the amino acids needed for anabolism, for instance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the good things about, again, coming back to the cosmonauts, the guys that you go out to space, you're up in space lab for a year, whatever it is they call it now, and you come back, you know, you're in a mess, right? I know they exercise in space now and they do other things, but it's a tough environment to live in. They give them the peptide bioregulators because they recover so much more quickly. And it's the same with the sports people. They recover so much more quickly.
Yeah, and that's where the priority lies, isn't it? You know, if you don't recover, you don't perform. Your recovery dictates your performance. Yeah. And in this day and age, when you see social platforms of people like, I just want to be as big or as strong as that person or as fast as that guy or girl right now, a lot of the time they don't focus on their recovery. It's just more of their heart rate variability tanks. They just overtrain. They're not able to synthesize as much as they possibly can. And they're beating a dead horse, where if they just focused a little bit on meditation, managing their stress, quality sleep, blah, 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 then maybe they're going to perform a little bit better. So yeah, that's one thing that I do suggest as well to a lot of my clients, even though a lot of it falls on dead ears, is, you know, nose to tail eating. Mm-hmm. As an active individual, and we're eating all this muscle meat, we're getting so much glycine, mm-hmm. and we're not balancing out that so much methionine, we're not balancing out that glycine to methionine ratio, mm-hmm. as we should. And we're going to get a lot of that glycine from eating liver, heart, organs. We're going to get vitamin A. We're going to get a lot of collagen. We're going to get more, you know, iron. We're going to get B vitamins, you know, and that are very highly bioavailable that you're not necessarily going to get from plants.
Exactly. I totally agree, Chris. And the other thing, of course, we can avoid now, and it's the wrong thing to do, is we don't change our food groups. You know, our ancestors, they ate with the seasons, right? There were no strawberries in winter in the UK. So you did, guess what? You didn't have them. So we changed. And I've got to tell you this very quickly. Again, I warned you. But anyone can go and look him up. There's a guy called Professor Paul Clayton. He's one of the big wigs at the Royal College of Medicine in London. And he did a study, which is a good few years old now, maybe several years old now. And one of the things we have in London that we can be quite thankful for, because of course England was the start of the Industrial Revolution, was we have very good records in the London libraries, and they're not online, or a lot of them are not online. So he and his team, they went down to the London libraries and they dug out all the deaths and births and all the rest of it of the mid-Victorians. Now, this was a period of, say, 1830, 1850. These were just pre-industrialization. So these guys were still mainly living in the country. The whole explosion of working in a factory and coming into the city had not yet happened. And they were shocked, because what they found was in 1830, if you had arrived as an adult, yes, childhood diseases could have eliminated a lot of people. But if you take out the fact, if you got to 15 years old, basically, and you that was it, you lived as long as we do now, right? And it goes, can't. That's from the records, and they've proven that. And you think, well, how? So there was this blip, and then of course what happened is the Industrial Revolution came along. People put themselves in a terrible environment, induced a lot of toxins from the burning of coal and goodness knows what else. And there was this dip, and we've been kind of climbing out of it ever since. But what Professor Paul Clayton has suggested, the reasons as to why at that time people lived longer were a fewfold. One, there was no gym membership in 1830 because everybody walked and worked. And if you were a manual laborer, you were expected to move 2 tons every day, 6 days a week. And of course, a rich man had a horse, but the ordinary guys, they walked everywhere. They ate, he reckoned, they ate on average 6,000 calories a day because they needed to. They were working outside in all weathers. Even the computers, that's to use the Dickinson term, these were the clerics of the day. So that you could say today we'd say a white collar worker. They had massive books. They'd be copying from one ledger to another ledger. They had these massive books. They had to move quite heavy things around, and they didn't sit down. The desks were stand-up desks. Nobody sat down. Forget what you've seen on television. They didn't sit down. So you put all that together, plus they were eating organic because there was no other choice. They were eating with the seasons. And the third thing was they had what we call a Dutch oven, which basically you cannot cook at high temperatures. So they used to cook the food at low temperatures for longer periods. And the guys in the Raw Food Society will tell you that's great because you're not destroying a lot of nutrition and you're not breaking the enzymes, the helper enzymes that are in the food. So going back to your nose to tail, eating organic, varying the diet, and eating fresh, obviously, and cooking don't super cook, don't superheat anything. So all that is helpful.
Yeah, don't overcook. And that's one thing that I found was fascinating when I started going down this quote unquote biohacking rabbit hole, like in 2014. And to help with a form of detoxification, I was dealing with mold toxicity at the time. Okay. And I started converting my food groups into organic, wild caught, humane raised, all of that. And I noticed that, of course, now I'm eating less, but still feeling just as good because now I'm having more nutrient dense food, less inflammation.
Yeah.
And I also got rid of a lot of the inflammation in my body that I thought was standard just from weight training and doing a lot of activity. Everybody has a little bit of tendonitis, the bicep tendons hurt, the elbows hurt, the knees hurt, the back hurt. And as soon as I started kind of eating a lot cleaner in that respect and not having a lot of the antibiotics that was in the food that I was eating, and the pesticides, the herbicides, the omega-6 oils, blah, 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 I just got rid of all this inflammation, which is phenomenal.
Absolutely right. And there are things in food, it's disgusting really, that are not on the label and they should be on the label. And for example, industrially produced milk, up to 146 different antibiotics are given to those cows.
That's unbelievable.
Where do you think
and you can't get raw milk anywhere,
Very hard to get raw milk, very hard to get raw milk, So, we're not conscious about what we're consuming, because it's actually inside the food, which is of course what GM food is as well. The antibiotics or whatever that are actually inside the food.
It's insane.
Now, while we can't imagine drinking coffee loaded with toxic chemicals, we unknowingly use skincare products that could be having a negative effect on our health as well. So things such as parabens, phthalates, silicone, carcinogens, can disrupt our endocrine system and have been known to cause various forms of cancer. So it's a murky world to navigate as it is. So why add skincare products to the list that can cause you harm. So make sure that you are checking each and every label to ensure that the words non-toxic are written all over it. And that's definitely what you're going to find with visual chemistry skin labels. And their skincare products are gluten-free, cruelty-free, all vegan, paraben-free, sulfate-free, silicone-free, talc-free, carcinogen-free, and they're eco-friendly. And I've been using this line for many, many years, and I often get, I get compliments to say that I look a lot younger than 47 years old. So I'm going to continue to use them. So your skin deserves the best, and shop for the products that I use by looking for the G stack on the Visual Chemistry Skin website. So that's exactly what I use every single day. The mask I'll use on a weekly basis, but everything else I use every day. So use the code GETHIN20, that's GETHIN 20, to save 20%.
All right, so you mentioned about these peptides regulating. If there's a listener here that's on hormone replacement therapy, for instance, okay, is there a potential for them to take a bioregulating peptide instead of TRT, or would they have to continue the TRT and then introduce the bioregulating peptide?
Right. I think it would partly depend on the need. If it's an extreme case, then I would say you're probably going to keep taking HRT. But what you'll almost certainly find is you can take a lot less. I know quite a few ladies who take the different estrogens during menopause and progesterone as well, of course. And they're always a bit shocked to find that by taking the ovary peptide, they end up having to reduce all the estrogens, because there are 3 principal main estrogens that are used today, and the progesterone. Some of them have stopped altogether, the ones that weren't taking perhaps too much in the beginning, but they're always shocked that it's almost a blanket coverage. Of course, the male andropause is not recognized by most doctors, but we go through it. It just happens at a slower rate. And of course, if we look at if you're on the phone to someone, you can't see their face, you can almost tell it's an old man, right? Because the voice has changed, the voice is feminized. If we look at older men, they start to feminize. And I'm sure you know why, because once we're over in our 60s, we're carrying around more estrogens in us than a 60-year-old woman, because she's depleted her estrogens and we've increased ours. So, men start to feminize as they get older. But so the short answer is it will depend on the individual case. But in all the cases I've seen, there certainly will be a reduction. If there's a need to take the HRT, then there will be a reduction in the hormones required. And of course, that means that you should do some closer monitoring, because you can't, let's say you take the testes peptide, us men, we take the testes peptide, and then we keep rubbing on, say, bioidentical testosterone cream, let's say that's what you're using, then you should monitor yourself, because if you don't change the testosterone cream, you might, but technically, if you're too high on testosterone, all you'll be doing is throwing away your money with the peptide.
Right, got it. That makes sense. And I guess it's the same as well if somebody has hypothyroidism and they're taking a form of, I don't know, T4 or T3, whatever it is, they'd have to kind of monitor it, but there's a potential for them to lower that dose.
Thyroid's one of my favorite subjects, actually. And what I always loved was the natural porcine thyroids, like Armour, for example, in the United States.
Yeah.
And they seem to work so much better. And for years, I was always fascinated with this. And for years, I thought, well, I know why they work better, because they actually contain T1, T2, T3, T4. They contain the 2 forgotten. And of course, the ratio. Jonathan Wright, who's a doctor I highly respect, has a clinic in Tahoma in Washington. His saying is always, we don't have to be rocket science. We follow nature. Right molecule, right time, right dose. And if it's not working, then one of those things is out of kilter. And so with the thyroid, it's, and especially just giving people T4, that's wrong. It's just wrong because you require an enzyme to convert it to T3. And there's loads of cases where they really screw people up. T3 is a better option if you're only going to have one of them. But if you take something like Armour, and then for years I thought, why is it that these pig extracted thyroids work so well? Is it just because it's got T1 and the ratio? And then I discovered that the pig thyroid is bioidentical to the human thyroid.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty remarkable. But of course now you can even take the thyroid peptide, and it will, if you're hyperthyroid, so if your thyroid's overactive, it will actually bring your level down. And if you're hypothyroid, which most people are, in fact, a great doctor called Broder Barnes, the late great Broder Barnes, who wrote the book Hypothyroidism, the Undiagnosed Epidemic, and he's now been he's now been overtaken by his pupil, Dr. Rick Wilkinson in Washington. That's Washington State, not Washington DC. And brilliant. And he reckoned that 70 to 80% of adults have some level of hypothyroidism. Some people say that's because we don't get enough iodine in our diets anymore. Could be. So with that in mind, there's a very, very easy way to find out if you're hypothyroid, okay? And that's without taking a blood test. This is the old, before labs were invented, this is how everyone did it. And the thyroid is so pin accurate, it's unbelievable. When you get out of bed in the morning, have a thermometer at the ready and take your temperature. Before you do anything, before you take your shower, do anything, take your temperature, write it down. And do that for a couple of weeks, and then look at the record and see what was the number that came up most often, okay? And you won't believe how accurate it is. Now, I'm going to talk Celsius because I'm not really au fait with Fahrenheit, but basically, if your thyroid is between 36.3 and 36.7, that's 0.4 degrees Celsius, you've got a good thyroid. But if it's regularly under 36.3 or regularly over 36, if it's regularly over 36.7, you're hyperthyroid. If it's regularly under 36.3, you're hypothyroid. Okay. And you can literally, whatever you decide to take, whether it's the thyroid peptide or Armour or whatever it is you're going to, or even iodine, right? Or you're going to eat seaweed, right? You like a bit of seaweed, whatever. You will see notch up 0.1 degree in about a week or two, 0.1. It's unbelievable. It always amazes me how incredibly accurate the thyroid is.
That's phenomenal. That's interesting. I'm going to share that with Sybil because she's been diagnosed with hypothyroidism. I'll share this podcast with her, and she's on medication for it.
I'd like to know if she's on T4.
Yeah.
Just pure T4, like Synthroid. Change it.
Okay.
T3 is a lot. I could tell you horror stories of patients who've gone through. Not today, but if you want to do it some other time, I'll be happy to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Please. Yeah, that'd be great. So let's go back to the quote unquote muscle the muscle bioregulating peptide. I'm not sure if the majority of my clients want to figure out how to put on more muscle. Of course, they just want to optimize their performance, but of course they want to repair themselves from injury. Like I have clients, which is funny. You'd think that the majority of the clients and listeners that I have would get injuries from strength trained sports, bodybuilding, powerlifting, stuff like that. A lot of it comes from endurance, just that repetitive running. They have an ankle issue, a foot issue, a hip issue, back issue. Does this muscle peptide help with the damage or repair and regeneration of like connective tissue such as tendons and ligaments? And a follow-up question, would you put that above, say, a BPC 157, or is this something that you could put in line with a BPC 157 that could be administered both at the same time?
Well, firstly, as I said at the top, I don't have enough experience with BPC. I've heard lots of people say lots of good things about it, but I haven't seen it in action myself, if you know what I mean. So I can't really say, and I'm sure it's a very good peptide, but I just don't know. It will, yes. Will it help with connective tissue and tendons? Yes, it does. I would suggest that rather than bulking up, if that's your aim, it's going to have more to do with recovery. speedier recovery. By the way, just as a sideline here, it's another peptide. It's not a bioregulator, but it's a dipeptide. It's one of my favorites. Is carnosine. That's not carnitine. If anyone, it's carnosine, and that one of the benefits for taking, say, a dose of around 500 milligrams to a gram, I would suggest, before you have a workout, is you will produce a lot less lactic acid. So if you suffer from, the old pain of lactic acid a lot after, you'll find that's greatly diminished. So you can take it before and perhaps even after a workout. So that's just as a sideline for you there. But by the way, there are, I should mention some other peptides, although again, they're not strictly bioregulators, and that's what's referred to as GHRPs, which is growth hormone releasing peptides. I've experienced with 3 of those. That's GHRP2, GHRP6, and semarelin. And they're interesting because, of course, growth hormone and its cofactor of IGF-1, because, if you're high in growth hormone, then you are consequently high in IGF-1. And I know there are people out there now who are actually using IGF-1 as insulin-like growth factor. Although it remains extortionately expensive, but I know people do use it. If you really want to, get big fast or get a lot of strength in muscles, testosterone is very good, but IGF-1 is the one in my book from what I've seen of it. The interesting thing about those 3 particular GHRPs that I mentioned is they don't have to be injected. Yes, they can be injected, but they don't have to be. So those folks who don't like injections or get bored with them or concerned with them, GHRP2 can be used sublingually, whereas GHRP6 and semarelin, they can be used sublingually, but the best way to use them if you're not going to inject them is intranasally. That's a good route. But I do personally favor semarelin's a weird one. Semarelin's a weird one because you can look at GHRP2, you can look at GHRP6, and you can say, well, these are agonists. These are stimulating the production of growth hormone from the pituitary. And the problem there is that once we get over 50, 55, our pituitaries kind of struggle. I'm sure we've all seen the chart of growth hormone in blood with age, and past the age of 35, it kind of falls off a cliff. And it goes down very, very quickly. But what's interesting, and here you guys can look for the work of a guy called Richard Walker, Dr. Richard Walker from Florida. And has he been in our magazine? Yes, twice he's been in our magazine talking about his work. Semarelin appears to be a releasing agent. So it's not encouraging the pituitary gland to make more growth hormone, but seems to release its reserves, because according to Rich Walker, it could well be that even older people are still making significant amounts of growth hormone, but for some reason, the releasing mechanism is failing to put it into blood. When you take semarelin, it's releasing the reserves. And so what he did in some human experiments is people were given GHRP2 and semarelin. And when that happened, they had a, wait for it, 7-fold increase in their growth hormone levels.
Wow.
7, right? Now that's synergistic. That really is. So they're not bioregulators, but and unfortunately at the moment, to the best of my knowledge, there isn't a pituitary bioregulator. There are 21 available today, but there isn't a pituitary one at the present time.
Interesting, because I've actually looked online and I see some of these websites that have like bioregulating peptides, and a couple of them are marketed as pituitary bioregulating peptides. So that's
I'd like to see their evidence. I'd like to see their evidence because, at the end of the day, with my group, the IAS, International Anti-Aging Systems, we've never been the kind of company that says we've got a product, what can we say about it? We follow the research. and we've tried and find the same product, the exact same product, because we figure if you want that result, you're most likely to get it with the exact same product. So, you know, I mean, otherwise people can make claims about whatever they want to, but show me the research, show me the evidence. And as far as I'm aware, and we wrote, I'm just sorry, I'm looking up here, but somewhere buried here. Oh yes, here we are. I must get my study organized. This book here, which I helped to write with two professors from Russia, Peptides in the Epigenetic Control of Aging, that is a scientific book. Okay, that goes into the detail. That explains how they work, why they work, how they orally pass through into the blood. And then we have a public book, which was written by a dear friend of mine, Marius Koyazis. And this is an introduction to what we're talking about today. It's all on Amazon. So, and this is called Peptide Bioregulator Revolution, the Peptide Bioregulator Revolution. That's only about $15. So if anyone wants to get into it, then, and the other one's about $70, but that's a deep dive, the other one.
Okay.
But that is the evidence. We can say, look, and of course the references, if anyone wants to go to PubMed and look all this stuff up, the reference is there. And that's one of the failings we have at the moment, is there is still masses of information still in Russian that hasn't been translated into English. So we're still working our way through this, you know, to try and get this information out.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So just for clarification then, what is the name of this muscle peptide?
Gotriax. Gotriax, yeah.
So would you say, Gotriax, I'm going to write that down. Would you say the GHRPs or the Gotriax would be better for injuries?
Well, that's a good point. It's hard to say. I mean, raising IGF-1 levels does wonders for injuries. But we also know that this muscle peptide helps people to recover faster. But is it from injuries or not? You know, you get that fatigue, right? Your muscles are sore, but they're not injured. I mean, you're supposed to be partly injured, but they're not significantly. You haven't stretched a tendon or, you know, done something more serious.
Is there a possibility then that those could potentially be stacked together?
Oh yes, they could. And unfortunately, I'm not aware of any study that's done that. See, one of the slightly different subject, but I hope you find it interesting. What people may not know listening to us now, Chris, is that there were 3 studies done in the Soviet Union, which are massive. I mean, massive. I mean, you just never hear about them in the West. And they took some of these peptides. The first company they went to was called Gazprom, and they're still going today. They're the people that produce the oil and gas in Russia. And they took 3,000 people, ordinary workers, Joe Blow workers, you know, in Siberia of all places. I mean, that's pretty tough to live there, right? So they're already in an extreme environment, and they're doing oil and gas stuff. You can imagine it's pretty heavy. These weren't office workers in New York, is what I'm trying to drive at here. Just ordinary guys and girls. 3,000 of them, and they monitored them over 12 years, right? 12 years. And they gave them 3 peptides, and those peptides were the pineal, the blood vessel, and the thymus. And what they showed at the end of the study, and then they had a whole bunch of other people they just gave some vitamins and minerals to. So in other words, if you will, a placebo. So the guys didn't know who were taking the peptides and who were taking the vitamins, okay? And at the end of the period, they found that the people that had been on the peptides, the 3 I spoke about, had 1/3 of the problems, any issues that the others did. And later on, they continued, even after some of these folks had retired, they continued monitoring, I think, for another 3 year, certainly 1 year, it may have been up to 3 years. And they found later on, they had 1/3 of the mortality. So they were 2/3 less likely to get a disease, and they were 2/3 less likely to die.
Wow.
That's a massive number. And then they repeated that study in a smaller number of people. But it was nearly 1,000 people, and it was over a 2-year period in a tractor factory in central Russia in a place called Kazan. And they saw very, very similar results. That was with those 3 peptides. Now, when they did that, which was in the 90s, there were certain tests that were not easily available to them. And the 2 tests I'm referring to are telomere length and DNA methylation. Now, there's a guy, an American doctor, his name is Bill Lawrence. He lives in Atlanta. I know Bill well. In fact, I've interviewed him a couple of times. And also, I'm talking to him right now this month because we're going to be doing a new article together, which will come out in the August magazine, the Aging Matters magazine. Because what happened was 3 years ago, he took 39 patients. He gave them the same regimen and the same peptides that was in the Soviet trial. And he's given them some more as well, actually. He's got more than that now. I think he's got 80 something patients now. But he said, I'm going to monitor you guys for 3 years. And I'm going to do these tests. And we're going to see if we can get anything like what the Soviets did. Well, that's finished now. In fact, it's slightly over 3 years, like about 3.5 years. And he's already released some of the results to me. And what is absolutely amazing is all these people, and this is a wide range of people, this is people in their 30s to in their 70s. What he's found is every single person has extended their telomeres and improved their DNA methylation. Now, the DNA methylation, which is the Horvath clock,
Yeah,
that is one of the biggies of them. I mean, telomeres is big, don't get me wrong, but the Horvath clock could be the most accurate thing we have right now as a single measurement to work out our biological age.
yeah. And would you put glycans in that category as well?
Yeah, it's very, I mean, there's, when you get down to biological age, there's a massive choice. I mean, I did a study of this with our medical director years ago, Ward Dean. He wrote a book called Biological Age Measurement, and that was a long time ago, but it still stands the test. I mean, you can, this piece of the skin that is between the thumb and the first finger here, if you pinch that for a minute, okay, time it for a minute and then let go, you time how long it goes back. That's a biological age measurement. Because you know, you have an elderly person, it might not even move. It might still stay there. See, so yeah, there's lots of tests you can do. Come back very quickly to the Horvath clock. I understand, and I don't know where they are, but there are some police departments, if they arrive at the scene of a homicide, okay, and they obviously, and there's some blood from the alleged perpetrator, they'll take that, of course, and they can tell from the blood, you know, whether it's a man or a woman, what blood group they are. And of course, they got the DNA. But if that person isn't on their files, they're going to have to get that person, take their blood, see their DNA, and know it's the same person. So they don't know who the person is, right? What they're now doing is they're now doing the Horvath test on it. Why would they do that? Because within about 7 years, it will tell them how old the person is. So it gives them, we now know we're looking for a 35-year-old-ish man, right?
Yeah, that's great. That's amazing. That's amazing. And going back to what you mentioned when they tested the telomeres of those Olympic athletes as well, because I've done various biological age tests. I've yet to do the DNA methylation. So that's going to come next. I've been able to reverse my biological age. So I've actually done some pilot tests with my clients with glycan age, for instance. And we know that people that are active individuals can cause a lot of inflammation and they increase their biological age past their chronological age, even though they look fantastic and look healthy.
Right.
Now, you've just told me like the 3 peptides that have been used in these studies. Do you think as of today there is a number one? Like I know epitalon has been thought of as a good peptide to help to reverse a biological age. Is there one peptide or maybe a combination that you feel is the best?
Well, you've just named it. You've just named it. It is the pineal peptide. There are 3 names for the pineal peptide because they have slight differences and also the way they're applied. Epitalon is a synthetic version of the pineal peptide. Endolutin is the oral version of, which is a natural bovine source of the pineal peptide, and then epitalamin is also another natural version of it. But in my opinion, this is the agent, and the pineal is a very special gland. It's a very special gland, and we'll go down another rabbit hole here. It's the gland, of course, that produces melatonin. I'm sure we're all familiar with melatonin. And what's so special about melatonin? Well, one of the world's great melatonin experts, a lovely man, an Italian professor by the name of Walter Pierpoli, who wrote all the original books. He wrote the bestseller, The Melatonin Miracle, which was back in the 90s. And anyway, long story short, Walter once said to me a phrase, and I love phrases. Because they put everything in a nutshell, and you get it, right? The phrase was, he said, sorry, forgive me, I love accents, I love different peoples. So when you speak Italian, you have to sing it, don't you? Because it's a nice language. And he says, Phil, I said, what is it? Melatonin is like a conductor of the orchestra. If you have orchestra and you have a no conductor, you make a noise. But with melatonin as the conductor of the endocrine system, the orchestra, you make a music. Because why? Because of course melatonin is released at night. Actually, its night peak is between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. That's why it's the most important time to be asleep. Okay, 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. That's when your eyes are doing all the rapid eye movement. There's a lot of hormone activity going on, because it's a signal to the body about when to produce. And then, of course, as we wake up, as the sun rises, melatonin disappears, and our hormones, once we've got cyclicity, our hormones have cyclicity, and when we have that, we have immunity, we feel good, etc. So that's all because of the pineal gland reacting to light, and it reacts to other things. It reacts to lunar light. That's fairly recent studies, and other things. So it's the way of our body knowing when it's day and when it's night, which is why when we travel halfway around the world, we feel so screwed up. Yeah. And of course, we know that melatonin helps to shorten the period of jet lag. So there is something very special about the pineal. And if we go down more rabbit holes, some people presume there is a death clock. And there is evidences that there is a death clock, that there is a programmed time. Well, if there is a programmed time, you need a counter. And the most obvious counter would be day, night, day, night, day, night, day, night, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever it is, right? And the pineal gland would be responsible for that. So that's only a theory, but we start with theories, and then eventually they become facts.
Well, just to show, doesn't it, the importance of sleep, where a lot of us just abuse that opportunity now. I don't know if the glasses that you're wearing are blue light blocking glasses, but a lot of us are exposed to, screens, artificial blue frequencies within our home office. And
to be honest, I don't need these, but when I'm looking at the screen is why I wear them.
Yeah, I understand. I usually wear the yellow lens during the day if I'm, exposed to a lot of artificial light. All the bulbs that I have in my house downstairs are all yellow. Looks like a brothel upstairs. It's up there, because I understand, like, I suffered from bad sleep many years ago. So I do whatever I can to optimize my own melatonin production whenever possible, because again, I want to ensure that my biological age and health is optimal.
Try and get some natural light bulbs. Try and get natural full spectrum light bulbs, and don't use fluorescence, obviously.
No, never fluorescence.
Yeah.
Never fluorescence.
The other thing is grounding, of course, to get grounded, and you can do that. I mean, people go and have their beds grounded and stuff. It's quite expensive, but you can do real simple ones. If you spend a lot of time at a computer, your hand's probably on a mouse mat most of the time, right? So why not ground the mouse mat?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've got a mat. I've got a mat as well underneath my desk there that I'm always grounding on. Went
Yeah,
out and had a coffee this morning with earthing myself outside. But
yeah,
I understand, like in Idaho or in the UK, sometimes the weather isn't forgiving. You don't want to go outside, so you have to kind of biohack your environment and get these earthing mats. Do whatever you can.
exactly right.
Okay,
But
so that was interesting. Okay, so we have like these like oral peptides as well
mhm,
that you mentioned. Now, if somebody is to look, like I mentioned, there's pineal gland peptides that I said that I saw on websites, but you can't just go online
mhm,
and look for these things. And it's much like the supplement industry or the CBD industry. It's the wild, wild west. You
mhm,
don't know what you're getting.
mhm.
Where would you suggest people to look for something like this?
Sure. Well, we've been doing it a long time. We work with the people in the field. I'm working with the Biogerontological Institute in St. Petersburg, have been now for quite a few years. In fact, we've invited a number of the world experts to a meeting in England this September. If anyone's interested,
I'm
it's called.
definitely interested.
Thank you, Chris. It's called the Profound Health Summit. So go to profound-health-summit.com and you'll see all the details there. But no, I see what you're saying. As I say, we're working with lots of doctors as well, and they network, and we help to supply them the right products, which in turn they supply to their patients. If anyone wants much more information on this or any other subject, because we have got an enormous library now, then our main website is antiaging-systems.com. And you can look up peptides, you can watch videos, you can read articles. There's all sorts of things going on there. And if you want to buy these things, we have links there to reputable suppliers. Okay. So you can pick something. Some products on there now don't have links because we're not happy with what's out there, but most of them do. We have links to reputable suppliers. We at the moment our outreach is basically United States, most parts of it, quite a few places in Western Europe, UK of course, and also Australia, and we have got someone in South Africa as well, in case anyone's listening from South Africa. So they don't, doesn't mean to say everyone's got everything, but I think people would be truly amazed. I mean, we've touched on some very interesting subjects today, Chris, and you've touched on basically you're fit, you're healthy, but you want to stay fit, healthy, or get even fitter and even healthier. That's great. It's a great goal. But of course, there are people with problems, serious problems, and you'd be amazed some of the turnarounds that peptides can do. In eyesight, you'd be gobsmacked. I mean, reversal of macular degeneration, reversal of cataracts.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So
Yeah.
you have peptides specifically for retina degradation.
Yeah.
Degradation.
The cataract one is in an eye drop. It's actually an eye drop. It's called Can-C. So, and they've done the studies on this. They've now done 2 human studies on this. And over a period of 4 to 6 months, reversal of cataract. Does it work in everybody? No, it doesn't work in everybody. But what they found was it was highly successful in 89% of the people who used it. In a clinic in St. Petersburg, which is called the Tree of Life Clinic, which is led by a lovely lady called Professor Svetlana Trofimova. They do injections and oral. Now, when I say injections, don't get scared because they don't inject into the eye. There are things that do inject into the eye, but not there. What they do, this area around the eye is called the orbit, and the sunken bit of the skull. And they just subcutaneously, like 1-2 millimeters, they will inject around the orbit of the eye, and they do that for 10 days. And then they put people on the retina peptide and a few other peptides, and they're reversing macular degeneration. They're even reversing, although it's fairly rare, it's called retinal pigmentosa. We don't know of another clinic in the world that can treat retinal pigmentosa. So, and how about this one? And this is happening in Italy, and it came out of the University of Rome. And this is where I have a little joke, and people go, "It's unbelievable." I've got stories galore like this. And they say, how come it's not in use? How come we don't know about it? How come our newspapers haven't got it on the front page? And I have a little joke and I say, if you want to keep something a secret, publish it. Because who's reading everything? Who's reading everything? There's millions of things being put out. So at the University of Rome, a gentleman, a surgeon by the name of Valero de Nicola, he has found a way to regenerate the cartilage in our knees and hips and negate the need for a knee or hip replacement.
That's unbelievable.
Not bad, is it? Or do you fancy having your leg coming off to have your hip put back on again? You know. And don't forget, these things wear out. So if you're 50 years old and you have your knee done, you might need it again in 10 or certainly in 20 years. Oh, that's something to look forward to. Sorry, I'm a bit facetious in my humor. So,
so that's an actual peptide that can help with the regeneration of cartilage. And like with these peptides, and we're going to have to end this podcast here very soon. But I could go on for literally a couple more hours. With these peptides, is it something that you would take indefinitely, or would you just take it for a week, for a month, or what?
Very good question, Chris. And actually, you're absolutely right. The remark, let's go back to our thyroid again. Let's go back to our favorite one. If you had a problem with your thyroid and you were taking whatever medication is you would more or less be taking that more or less every day, because you put the thyroid in your blood, the hormone, it dissipates, the next day you put it back in, and so on and so on and so forth. The thing about these bioregulators is they're gene switches. And there are periods of time where the gene will either stay switched on or be silenced. So amazingly, the average, there are variances depending on the need and so on. I can get into that maybe another time. But the amazing thing is the average person would only take it for 10 days every month. And if you just wanted to kind of do a maintenance, you just wanted to say, I'm happy where I am, I just want to make sure everything's going to keep going that way, you might only do 10 days every 3 months. So you're not, these are not products to be taken every day. Not at all. And now, if you want to get into a financial side, it makes them very cost effective, because suddenly 4 packs of peptides, 20 capsules in, could be enough for the year.
Right. Got it. That makes sense. Okay. It's good to know. All right. Well, thank you very much for the time, Phil. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I don't think I've actually had a guest on before where I've just made so many notes during our conversation. It's fascinating. And, can you just remind us once again, before we sign out, where the name of that summit? I'll put obviously the links in the show notes, where people, you mentioned the anti-aging website as well, and where people can find you should they want to hire your services at all.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Well, the main website, where we have thousands of pages now, it really has. I mean, I think we put it up in '96 and it's just been growing and growing and growing. We did a huge work about 2 years ago to try and reorganize it, and but that's antiaging-systems.com, and you can spell it with an E or without an E. So, my older brother, because obviously I think everyone knows I'm British, always likes to rib me because we spell it the American way without the E. And he always likes to say, are you still doing the anti-agging? But every time I see him. But antiagingsystems.com is the big site, videos, links, all sorts there. And then if you want to learn about our meeting this September, that is the profound-health-summit.com. And if anyone would like to read a magazine where it's kind of condensed, it's a nice thing, it's nicely laid out and all that sort of thing, then aging-matters.com, and downloads are free of charge.
Okay, phenomenal. Well, thank you very much once again. I'm sure I'd love to have you on the show again once again in the future, and I hope to meet you in the UK in September, October.
Yeah, 1st of October is the main day, but it's 3 days. It's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, basically. But yeah, but Saturday is the day that everyone's talking. Sunday, everyone's having a big discussion. So I thought that would be interesting. The audience can ask questions, but I also want to get all the speakers round a table and everyone listen to what they talk about. Yeah, we get the conversation stimulated about it, and then everyone earwigs, to use the term. And so I, tried, because we know it's about networking. Everybody will have breakfast and lunch and dinner together. So,
Yeah,
and I think that's important, because you might find yourself sat down and you turn it and you go, "Oh, Professor Campbell, I was just listening to your lecture this afternoon. Oh, can I ask you a question?"
Yeah,
That's what it's
for
all
sure.
about.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I thought that was very good about the Health Optimization Summit. Before it all started, we had like a dinner, and people could interact. There was probably about an hour between each course, or maybe 45 minutes, which was a little bit annoying for myself. I just wanted to eat, but that was purposely done so people could interact with the speakers.
That's very good. And the other thing is, I've been to a lot of conferences in my time, and if you're really into optimal health, let's call it that, you don't really want to find yourself going into their canteen at lunchtime and being offered KFC and fries, right?
Yeah.
Hang on, so the quality's got to be there, and where we're holding this is in a very swanky hotel called Luton Hoo, because the food and drink quality is very high,
Yeah.
So, but no, I'd be delighted to see you there, Chris. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, just send a message through any of those websites that I've mentioned. There's an email link there, and just say, for the attention of Phil, and it will come to my desk.
That's awesome. Great. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for being so accessible. And I look forward to optimizing my health with all these little toys that we can definitely learn from. So thank you very much, Phil. And to everybody listening, thank you for your time. If you do like this podcast, please like, comment, share, subscribe. And until next week, this is the Chris Gethin Podcast, and we are out.
And remember, to go shopping for my G-Stack, go to www.visualchemistryskin.com. Thank you ever so much for listening. My name is Chris Gethin, and I am out.